of your application at an earlier stage, so in your CI system or a build time, and then the build of the actual physical machine or the virtual machine is a bit simpler, because then that's just about getting a containerization layer onto the box.
So is it fair to say it's almost like moving from an interpreted or a jittered language to a fully compiled language? I'm moving the configuration and the state of building my machine is moving to build time when I create this image after I've done my software update as part of my CA process, and then it's an entire artifact that's built that I then shift through and deploy. As opposed to if you say in an interpreted world is like installing and running some scripts and doing all this stuff right out there in the production environment.
Yeah, and if you combine that with a sensible configuration management strategy outside of your containers, inside of your VMs, then you're well on your way to not only automating your infrastructure, but insulating yourselves from surprises like this box has come up and Ansible hasn't quite run in the same way. And all that stuff moves to build time, so you can validate it there, and validate it as part of your, when you're making your binary, rather than when you really need it, which is when the server comes up.
Can anyone speak to what kind of workloads we're actually going to be able to run on Nano? Because what I've read so far is there won't be full support for the .NET stack. You won't be able to run IIS in it. What is it going to be able to support? The examples are stuff like Nginx and MySQL. These are things which, frankly, you can run now on a Linux stack with pretty little pain. So, what's it going to be useful for?
So what's the use case for Nano, and what are the kind of workloads? If I was architecting an application from scratch now, what are the kind of workloads that I'd be looking to use Nano for? Does anybody want to take that one?
I don't want to take that one.
I'd probably take part of that. I mean, you know,
there was an interview with Zinovich, I think at Ignite, and there was exactly the same question, and it was like, oh yeah, V1 and Nano's going to support like nothing. What's the point? And just like the whole knowing smile of like, they know that people want to run SQL, they know people want to run IIS. It's like, but it's engineering effort that needs to be done. I mean, SQL's got a massive core OS itself, and so all those things, there's no point doing it unless you can do it. I mean, and all of this stuff is so they can run Azure better. I mean, don't get confused about that. I mean, this is as the point made this morning. They're feeling all the pain you felt for the past 20 years. They're feeling that now, and they realise, we better do some shit about it.
I mean, I think to answer that question from my point of view, you know, we have customers that kind of work in the online comparison engine space. Do you know what I mean? And they've got, you know, robots that are out there that distribute, you know, it's like an app tier that is distributing quotes out to partners to, you know, get you the best price, you know, type stuff. And I see that as a perfect workload for a scalable, rapid starting, pretty much a single process. It runs this one thing, and it gives me some options. As at the moment they kind of have a monolithic instance of this quote robot that handles all of their partners. But now I can actually sort of say, well, I'll have a quote robot that just handles one of my partners, and I'll have 20 different versions of that quote robot with slightly different configurations, all tested and validated and done at build time. And then I can have as many instances of those as I want. I can have some kind of orchestration layer that's sitting on top of it that is dynamically, quickly, you know, building up, spinning up a new instance of this as my load starts to go up in peak times. So I very much see it as that's that app tier, you know, Windows service kind of use case is where I really see it. I don't know.
There's a huge chance that you're going to have DNX running on Nano. Actually, probably you're going to have at least .NET Core running on Nano. So this is something that if you're using .NET Core, probably you're going to have that. But I think this is part of pathway that we're going through. The VMs are getting lighter and containers are getting heavier. So like the Hyper-V container that's a little bit heavier than the other container. At the same time, you have the VMs going the other way, okay? VMs are right now really have to actually set up and to spin up. So we are having VMs going the other way, trying to be a little bit lighter, and the same way that we have containers that are trying to get some functions that are available only on VMs right now. So I think Nano is pretty much going that way. Probably, maybe they went too far away and actually lose a lot of things that are useful on VMs. But again, most of the, especially small workloads or things that are not dependent on old Windows infrastructure, it's like .NET Core probably is going to run on Nano. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not from Microsoft, so I cannot talk about them. So,
anybody else want to talk to that?
So if you look at what's happening in the Linux world, containers are meant to be very composable, and so for it to be composable, you need something very small to start off with. Windows Server Core is great, but it's only a 9 gig image straight off the bat, so it's not as small if you want it. So if you do want to run statically compiled assemblies on a Windows server which inside a container, having something which is very small, which allows you to bootstrap it, is a great starting point. In future, maybe CoreZilla will be an extension on top of it, and then IS maybe future way down the line that it will be layers on top. But I think this is the flat V1 starting point where everything will be built upon later modules and later components.
It certainly sounds like it's not going to be much utility for any kind of legacy apps.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a shift in thinking, and I think it's absolutely the right thing that Nano is Nano by name and Nano by nature, because we're moving away from a world of big data centers with undercommitted capacity, and more into an elastic world where it's absolutely crucial that the thing you're pushing out is small and is agile in more ways than one, so that you can scale it up and scale it down quickly.
I gotta make a point there. I think the whole web scale thing annoys the hell out of me
because MongoDB is web scale.
I mean, okay, you saw Just Eat, and they have peak load 5 till 8 or whatever it is, and so them spinning up 200 instances you talked about for 1,200 transactions a minute. I mean, I think there's some interesting points there about, do you really need to be deploying Nano servers in a minute rather than 15 minutes?
Yes.
I think lots of you that's true, but I think for lots of people it's not true. And I think
so
it's interesting to focus on the cost compared to the cost of actual development of making that process work. And I think look at
how predictability is your traffic flow. I mean, I know Perry's got a fantastic example from SeatWave. If you want to tell us about your take that example, Perry.
It's from a little while ago, but again, it is more about we're in a predictive situation. But what we couldn't predict at SeatWave, we're now part of the Ticketmaster family, and at this time we weren't. So it was actually great news for us at that point that Ticketmaster and everybody else in the ticketing space went down, and our traffic just went nuts, right? Because we were the only game in town that actually stayed up. But it wasn't. We weren't dealing with microservices. We weren't dealing. We were just dealing with good old-fashioned, well-maintained code that could handle the scale and having that backstop of offload the traffic when it got too much, and that was done. It was done by F5 load balancers, right?
Some clever queuing.
But and sort of like, we always called it queuing, but it wasn't queuing really. It was a deflection method, right? It was basically a
if you really want take-back tickets, take-back tickets, come back in 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, we didn't even say that. It was more like just saying, we tell the consumer that you're in a queue, but you weren't really in a queue.
Don't tweet that.
Well, it was all, but the queuing was done at the client. That's where I'm saying. So it was delegated to the browser, and then the browser would come back and request the F5 saying, have you got capacity?
That's not the case in Ticketmaster in general, by the way.
Yeah.
You actually are in a queue there.
Yeah.
Gareth?
But that was just you know different things at different times. And now, if we were moving forward, you know, as we kind of expand that business and stuff like that, you don't want to queue at all, right? So you're kind of getting out into that space of wanting to do this web scale. There is kind of a thing, and if you're doing on true, you know, unexplained event when the rest of the competition kind of disappear, yeah, you are going to want to spin up in a minute, because even me as an ops guy, I couldn't predict that.
And also, if you're paying per megabyte of RAM per minute, then you don't want to waste it on things like GUIs and other libraries and everything.
I completely agree on that, and I think there's also an aspect that, I mean, you talk about well-maintained code. I go into many clients and they have problems with their database because they don't have well-maintained code, so they have a very large instance to cope with bad queries, and it's like, well, fix the queries and then you don't have to pay that.
So Gareth, it's been waiting.
And that's a
It is. Hardware is cheaper than good developers. Discuss. We'll come back to that point. So Gareth has got it.
So I was going to raise the issue of that time to provision, that speed, isn't just useful for capacity and sort of like things where that's traffic spot. For development environments, for actually a bunch of security situations where, like, if you don't need it, you can switch it off, it can't be compromised. Security person's dream. It's like, what? It's not running? There's so many.
It's not connected to the internet because we turned it on.
When you can do things in order of magnitude faster, that the capability to do so allows you to do things you haven't thought of.
Yeah.
And testing is a great example. Sort of the idea that I'm just even talking about is a lot. They spin up their entire testing environment once a day. There's some money, but actually, ignore the money bit. The fact that they spin it up means it's like they're doing it every day. It works. Like, do that 5 years ago?
We had test environments that drifted and went all over the place.
I completely buy the testing thing. The ability to, in a pipeline, spin up a test environment that you can go and run and execute a load of tests. However, most of the testing I've seen that is complicated. I mean, interesting to talk about integration testing, not just small unit testing. That takes a number of minutes, and therefore, in the scheme of things, sort of starting an AWS instance that doesn't have to be provisioned, but just has to be started, in the scheme of the whole process, is not very large.
I know at London Web Performance about 3 years ago, Betfair gave a talk on their testing stuff, and they basically said that their test environments, took so long to spin up and so long to get. They were so heavily cached to get to a steady state that actually truly represented the performance of the environment. Literally took hours. Do you know what I mean? Because they had so much data. So their thing was that they were trying to have longer running test environments and ways to just keep them up and keep them running, because they just couldn't. The warm-up time was just so huge because of the types of data sets they were talking about. So we've got 15 minutes left. Does anybody have any quick question? Yeah?
So a lot of people talk about Docker with containers. It has some criticisms, like having to run a super user, which pain. So is it worth still going down that route, or is it worth having a look at things like Rocket or anything else out there in terms of containers?
Same answer as I give to Dan, actually. Docker's there, and Rocket, I speak to this great guy called Milosh who runs the Rocket group, he's convinced it's there. There's a lot of advantages to Rocket, but it's not really a thing yet. Docker, again, there's a level of maturity there, which has come about. There's a lot of early criticisms of Docker, some of which are still valid. Things like, can your containers interfere with each other? Answer sort of still yes a bit, unless you SE Linux them or whatever. I think the great thing about Rocket is that it's keeping the Docker guys honest. Yeah, there's lots of problems with Docker. You want to upgrade your Docker daemon, or your containers stop. It should be out of bounds from that, and Rocket solves that problem by delegating that stuff to system D. So the whole open source thing is kicking in there, and inventing a whole load of things, which arguably you should say, well, no, Docker's already done stuff like that, they did it differently, but it adds to the maturity of the technology, and not just the Docker, the product, but of the whole container piece. So yeah, it's great to see all that stuff coming in.
Yeah, whenever 2 or more Linux systems administrators are gathered in one place, you'll have 3 different opinions on how to actually do anything.
And they're all wrong.
Yeah. and nothing will ever get done. Because I'm too busy arguing about it. So there was a question over there.
I've done a little Docker, but I haven't been following the Microsoft containerization very closely. If I wanted to do an ASP.NET application in container, is it kind of obvious whether I should be looking at Nano or ASP.NET next running in Linux? Which of those is kind of first?
How do you, well, I think some of those, so where do you choose between running on a running on a Linux platform, running in Nano, sort of in a micro server, for want of a better word, running in a container, running in a Hyper-V container, running in a full-blown VM, or running on tin? Yeah. Yeah, that's an entire conference.
I only have 2 of them.
Okay.
I can give the proper Microsoft answer to that. It just depends.
Can you expand on that? Come on, can you expand on that, Ian?
It really does. It just depends on what your environment is, what you're trying to do, how big it is, how scalable you want it to be, where you want to run it, what it does, where do you think it's going. It really does depend.
What's your security requirements? What's your traffic requirements?
How much money you've got? Are you good with licensing?
Okay.
It really does depend. But more than happy to talk to you.
So the answer is it's not obvious right now.
No.
No.
So,
maybe.
Personally, I would start with the simplest for you. Personally, I would start on Linux and ASP.NET and try and get it working there and figure out how far you can get, and then you'll figure out where you need to move to. So when things like Nano Server / Windows Core provide great functionality, especially if you need Active Directory integration and other Windows-centric processes. And so it gives you a door and an option which was previously closed. But by starting at the base and the foundation, you figure out what breaks, and then it tells you where you need to go. If it works, great, it works, and you just carry on.
If you are going to do right now, I would go for sure with Linux and go into a Docker container, because it's the only thing that actually works and supports in production right now. But again, I don't know in 2 months or 3 months how it is going to be if we are going to have 2 Nano containers on Nano server. So
We've got 8 minutes left, and I want to just quickly ask some questions about SQL Server 2016. Really? Really? We can talk about some data, we can talk about some SQL Server. SQL Server, what's the future for SQL Server? A lot of people I know seem to be moving their stuff off into MySQL, Postgres, NoSQL databases. Thoughts on the future of SQL Server and the direction of SQL DevOps?
No one uses it, do they? Who's using SQL? Okay, a few. I think SQL was free in old days. I mean, it was really dirt cheap compared to the Oracle of the world. And I think everyone got bit by the 2012 licensing, which everyone hates because the licensing costs went up by 4-fold, which doesn't really taste nice. In terms of where it's going, it is a big beast that does a lot of stuff, and so they've got 2016 is bringing JSON support. You're getting all sorts of integration with R and doing poly-based stuff up to data lake and all sorts of amazing stuff that is coming as a single product. If you want a single product that's going to go and do all these things for you, then it's great. And I think this is where looking at the true cost in terms of actual resource, skilling, backup, recovery, all these things, it's a very easy choice. if you're running an online operation and you need to do indexing and all these things, then yeah, you've got to pay more for the Enterprise Edition if you want to have SQL as a SQL instance. The one thing I would say though, that there's been lots of talk about AWS. SQL Azure is the Azure sort of SQL in the box, and you get 3 copies, so you get complete HA. It is Enterprise Edition. You get all the features that you get in Enterprise Edition, plus you get the features being delivered as they come out, so you don't have upgrade pains. The cost is a fraction of Enterprise Edition, and so if you are looking at a cloud story, then SQL Azure is a real strong, compelling thing to do. Other things, you've got read-only secondaries, so how many people have got a replication topology to read data for their websites? That's a pain in the arse to manage. Transactional replication that goes wrong is difficult. You need skills to manage it. If you understand latencies of mirrors and stuff, then you can have read-only replicas with SQL Azure and basically distribute your read-only activity onto other instances, which is all very good. I think the other big thing that's coming is pools. Not swimming pools, but elastic pools. Not elastic bands, but SQL and pools. You define a pool type, which is either basic, premium, or standard or premium, and you say how many units. It's a bit like consolidation and virtualization. That you say, I want to reserve this amount of power, and I can have as many databases as I want in that, and they can peak up to that power. How many people have tried SQL Azure before? Right, okay, a few. You'll find at the lower instances it really sucks. I mean, it can just about run my granny's website.
What's your granny's website? Is it knitting.com?
My granny.co.uk is probably not a good website to go visit. I'm not sure that's suitable for safe for work. So she has some peak workloads.
So, just I can just see the minds have gone now.
Sorry.
So the big benefit is that you don't have to buy 10 databases all at premium 3 level, which is going to cost you an absolute fortune. You can buy a premium P3, 1,000 DTUs of power, and have as many databases. So Just Eat guys talking about one database that they want to split out. If you split that out, you can get the benefit of having lots of smaller databases with the manageability aspects of that, and you're still getting the peak ability if you want to go and have that workload peak. So there's huge things coming. It'll be interesting to see whether they adopt a slightly different licensing thing in the future, because you are paying for SQL integration services, analysis services, reporting services, and in the model of taking smaller components, so yeah, DynamoDB or any other database so that you want to imagine, they've got to be compelling. But anyway, that's my little soapbox.
Cool. We've got 3 minutes left. Given that it's a WinOps conference, I might give the last 3 minutes to Susan to talk about well, what's next. I mean, I know we've been doing a lot of Azure open source. I think something like 30% of the Azure workloads are actually running open source content now. Any particular things you want to talk about from a Microsoft perspective? Core messages for what's coming up in the rest of this year and 2016?
Oh God. This is where I feel like a spy because I know a lot, but I can't tell you half of it. Or I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. I think down to like SQL. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at Azure machine learning yet. Have you looked at the data science bit of that? Has anyone tried that out yet?
We have with some product development we're doing, and guys are actually really impressed. This shit's really easy.
It is pretty good. It makes everyone able to be a data scientist without having to write my code and stuff like that. So that's definitely one to look at, and you can get a free trial at the moment because it's, I think it's still out in preview. So it's definitely one to look for. With open source, we're doing a lot more with all the different platforms. So as you can see, you know, just throughout Microsoft, like we've got Office running on the non-Microsoft devices and things like that. So when I normally talk about Microsoft and open source, I do have a slide which says Azure is the open cloud, and someone went, does that mean it's not secure? And it's like, no, that's not what I meant at all. So it is secure, but we are very open to open source. So there's lots of developments